The winter of 1878 hit Montana Territory with a vengeance, turning the once golden plains into a merciless expanse of white that could freeze a man to his bones in minutes. Samuel Zane pulled his coat tighter around his broad shoulders as the howling wind threatened to tear it away, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. He had been riding for 3 days straight, pushing his stallion Rusty through the growing storm to reach his newly purchased ranch before the worst hit. The former cavalry officer turned cowboy had spent his life savings on this parcel of land after years of driving cattle and dodging bullets, hoping to finally put down roots far from the memories of war and loss. "Almost there, boy," Samuel muttered to his horse as they crested the hill that would give him his first view of the property. The ranch house stood in the distance, a simple structure silhouetted against the snow-laden sky. His chest swelled with pride at the sight, his land, his future, but something caught his eye that didn't belong. A thin plume of smoke rose from the chimney of the cabin. Samuel's hand instinctively moved to the Colt revolver at his hip. He hadn't expected anyone to be there. The previous owner, old Jim McGregor, had assured him the place would be vacant. Slowly, cautiously, he urged Rusty forward, approaching from downwind to avoid announcing his presence too soon. The cabin sat nestled against a backdrop of pine trees, the windows dark despite the smoke suggesting occupation. Samuel dismounted, tying Rusty to a post before drawing his revolver. The snow crunched beneath his boots as he approached, his senses heightened by years of frontier living. He paused at the door, listening. For a moment, only the wind spoke, but then a soft sound. A whimper, perhaps, or a muffled cry. Samuel took a deep breath and pushed the door open with the barrel of his gun. The interior was dim, lit only by the dying embers in the fireplace. As his eyes adjusted, Samuel made out 2 small figures huddled together near the hearth, wrapped in what appeared to be threadbare blankets. Children. 2 little girls, their faces smudged with dirt and tears, looking up at him with terror in their eyes. "Please don't hurt us," whispered the older one, who couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 years old. She clutched a younger child to her chest protectively, a little girl of perhaps 4 or 5. Samuel holstered his weapon immediately, his heart clenching at the sight of the children trembling before him. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said softly, kneeling down to appear less threatening. "What are you doing here? Where are your parents?" The older girl's chin trembled. "They're gone. The fever took them 3 weeks ago. We were traveling to Helena to find our aunt, but the wagon broke down, and then the snow came." Samuel noticed then how thin they were, how their clothes hung loosely on their small frames. How long had they been alone? How had they survived? "We found this house," the girl continued, her voice small but determined. "Nobody was here, and we were so cold. We only took a little wood for the fire. We can leave now if you want." The younger child began to sob quietly, burying her face in her sister's shoulder. Samuel felt something shift inside him, a protective instinct so fierce it nearly took his breath away. These girls were completely alone in the world, just as he had been after the war took his family. He couldn't leave them to the mercy of the Montana winter. "You're not going anywhere," he said firmly, then softened his tone when he saw fear flash in their eyes. "What I mean is, you don't have to leave. This is my ranch now, and it seems to me you both need a safe place to stay." He moved slowly toward the fireplace and added more wood from the stack nearby, bringing the fire back to life. The warmth began to fill the small space. "My name is Samuel Zane," he said, turning back to the girls. "What are your names?" "I'm Beatrice," the older girl replied cautiously. "This is my sister, Ellie." Samuel nodded, removing his coat and draping it around their shoulders. It swallowed them both whole, but would provide more warmth than their thin blankets. "Well, Beatrice and Ellie, I think we should get you something to eat. Then we can figure out what to do next." As he rummaged through his saddlebags for the jerky and hardtack he'd brought for the journey, Samuel made a decision that would change all their lives forever. "You're mine to protect now," he said, his voice rough with emotion as he handed them the food. "If you want to stay, that is, at least until we can find your aunt." Beatrice looked at him with eyes too old for her young face, as if assessing his character in one penetrating gaze. After a long moment she nodded, accepting the jerky with a trembling hand. "Thank you, Mr. Zane." That night, As the storm raged outside and the girls slept on the small bed, the only piece of furniture old Jim had left behind, Samuel sat by the fire and wondered what he had gotten himself into. He knew nothing about raising children, let alone girls. But as he watched them sleep, their faces peaceful for the first time since he'd found them, he knew he couldn't have made any other choice. The next morning dawned clear and cold. Samuel had slept on the floor near the fire, his saddle as a pillow. He woke to find Beatrice standing over him, studying his face with curiosity. "Good morning," he said, sitting up and rubbing his stiff neck. "Are you really a cowboy?" she asked, her head tilted to one side. Samuel chuckled. "Yes, madam. Been punching cows since I was not much older than you." "Our pa was a teacher," Beatrice said, her voice tinged with sadness. "He was taking us to Helena because there's a school there that wanted him." Samuel nodded, unsure what to say. He'd never been good with words, especially ones meant to comfort. "I can read," Beatrice offered, as if presenting a skill that might make her more valuable to keep around. "I can teach Ellie, too." "That's real good," Samuel replied, standing up and stretching. "Reading's important. Now, how about we see about some breakfast?" Over a simple meal of coffee for Samuel and the last of his provisions shared between the girls, they began to form a tentative plan. Samuel would need to ride into the nearest town, Buffalo Creek, for supplies. He couldn't leave the girls alone again, so they would have to come with him. "It'll be a tight fit on Rusty," he explained. "But he's a strong horse." The journey to Buffalo Creek was slow, with Samuel walking alongside Rusty while the girls rode double on the saddle. Beatrice sat tall and alert, while Ellie clutched her sister's waist, her eyes wide as she took in the vast landscape. Buffalo Creek was a small settlement, little more than a general store, a saloon, and a handful of other buildings clustered together against the wilderness. Samuel helped the girls down from Rusty and tied him to the hitching post outside the general store. "Now," he said, kneeling down to look them in the eyes, "folks might ask questions about you two. Just let me do the talking, all right?" They both nodded solemnly. The bell above the door jingled as they entered the store. A woman in her 40s looked up from where she was arranging bolts of fabric on a shelf. "Samuel Zane," she said warmly. "Heard you bought the McGregor place. About time someone took it off our hands." "Mrs. Blackwood," Samuel greeted with a tip of his hat. "Good to see you again." "And who are these little ones?" Mrs. Blackwood asked, her gaze softening as she looked at the girls, half hidden behind Samuel. "This is Beatrice and Ellie," Samuel said, placing a protective hand on each of their shoulders. "They're staying with me for a while." Mrs. Blackwood's eyebrows rose slightly, but she didn't press for details. Instead, she smiled at the girls. "Well, aren't you two pretty as pictures? Are you hungry? I've got some fresh cookies in the back." While Mrs. Blackwood led the girls to a small table near the potbelly stove, Samuel began gathering the supplies they would need: flour, sugar, coffee, bacon, beans, and other staples. He paused by a rack of children's clothing, realizing the girls would need warmer attire for the Montana winter. "They'll need dresses and coats," came a soft voice from behind him. Samuel turned to find a young woman he didn't recognize standing there. She had chestnut hair pulled back in a simple bun, with a few wisps framing a face that struck him as both kind and determined. "I'm Brianna Vance," she said, offering her hand. "I'm the new schoolteacher in Buffalo Creek." Samuel took her hand briefly, noting how small it felt in his calloused palm. "Samuel Zane, just moved into the old McGregor ranch." "With 2 young girls, I see," Brianna said, her gaze drifting to where Beatrice and Ellie sat with Mrs. Blackwood. "Your daughters?" "No," Samuel replied, feeling strangely defensive. They needed help. I found them at the cabin when I arrived yesterday." Brianna's expression shifted to one of concern. "Are they orphans then?" Samuel nodded, lowering his voice. "Lost their parents to fever a few weeks back. They were trying to reach an aunt in Helena when they got stranded." "How terrible," Brianna murmured, her eyes filling with compassion. "Do you plan to take them to Helena?" "I told them I would," Samuel said. "But with winter setting in, the passes might already be blocked. They'll have to stay with me until spring at least." Brianna studied him for a moment, as if assessing his capability for such a responsibility. "Do you know anything about caring for children, Mr. Zane?" Samuel felt his cheeks warm under her scrutiny. "Not much, madam." but I reckon feeding them and keeping them warm can't be too different from tending to calves. A smile tugged at the corner of Brianna's mouth. I think you'll find there's a bit more to it than that. For one thing, they'll need an education. The older one, Beatrice, she says she can read. Their pa was a teacher. Was he? Brianna's interest seemed piqued. Well, that's fortunate. Still, they should be in school. Buffalo Creek schoolhouse is small, but we have room for 2 more pupils. Samuel hadn't thought that far ahead. He'd been focused on immediate needs: food, shelter, warmth. I suppose that would be good for them, he said slowly, though the ranch is a fair ride from town. 7 miles, if I recall correctly, Brianna said. Too far for daily travel in winter, I agree. She appeared to consider something for a moment. Perhaps I could ride out once or twice a week to continue their lessons, at least until the weather improves enough for them to attend regularly. Samuel stared at her, surprised by the offer. You'd do that? Education is important, Mr. Zane, she said simply, and those girls have lost enough already. Before Samuel could respond, Mrs. Blackwood called out, Samuel, come see. Beatrice is reading from my catalog, as pretty as you please. Samuel and Brianna moved to where the girls sat. Beatrice was indeed reading aloud from a Sears Roebuck catalog, her finger tracing along the lines of text as Ellie listened, entranced. Ladies' fur, trimmed winter boots, guaranteed waterproof, $2.50. Beatrice read carefully. Very good, Brianna said, sitting down beside them. You read beautifully, Beatrice. Beatrice looked up, startled by the newcomer, but pleased by the praise. Thank you, madam. Girls, this is Miss Vance, Samuel introduced. She's the schoolteacher here in Buffalo Creek. A teacher like Pa, Ellie said softly, speaking up for the first time since they had entered the store. That's right, Brianna smiled gently at the younger girl. And I would very much like to continue your lessons while you're staying with Mr. Zane. Beatrice's eyes widened. You mean we're going to school? Of a sort, Samuel explained. Miss Vance has offered to ride out to the ranch to teach you, since it's too far to come to town every day. Really? Beatrice looked from Samuel to Brianna, hope lighting her features. We can keep learning? Absolutely, Brianna assured her. Education is a gift that no one can take away from you, no matter what happens. Samuel watched as the girls beamed at Brianna, already warming to her kind manner and gentle voice. Something stirred in his chest, gratitude mixed with another feeling he couldn't quite name. Now, Mrs. Blackwood interjected, let's get these girls properly outfitted for winter. Can't have them freezing on that drafty old ranch of yours, Samuel. The next hour was spent selecting appropriate clothing for the girls. Samuel, completely out of his depth among the array of fabrics and styles, deferred to Brianna's and Mrs. Blackwood's judgment. By the time they finished, each girl had 2 new dresses, warm stockings, sturdy boots, winter coats, mittens, and woolen caps. I can't thank you enough for your help, Samuel said as they prepared to leave, his purchases loaded into saddlebags and a small crate tied to Rusty's back. It's what neighbors do, Mrs. Blackwood said warmly. And you bring these girls back to visit soon. It's nice having young ones in the store again. I'll ride out tomorrow afternoon for their first lesson, Brianna added. If that suits you, Mr. Zane. Samuel nodded, suddenly aware of how her presence had made the daunting task of caring for 2 orphaned girls seem more manageable. That would be fine, Miss Vance. We'll look forward to it. As they rode back to the ranch, Beatrice sitting in front of Samuel on the saddle, while Ellie dozed against her sister's back, Samuel found himself thinking about Brianna Vance. There was something refreshing about her straightforward manner and genuine concern for the girls. It had been a long time since he had given much thought to any woman, his life on the trail leaving little room for such considerations. Mr. Zane, Beatrice's small voice broke into his thoughts. Yes, Beatrice. Do you really want us to stay with you? You don't even know us. Samuel considered her question carefully. I know enough, he said finally. I know you're brave and smart. I know you take good care of your sister, and I know you deserve a safe place to grow up. But what if our aunt is looking for us? Then we'll find her come spring, Samuel promised. But until then, you have a home with me, if you want it. Beatrice was quiet for a long moment. I think we do, she said softly. Wanted, I mean. Samuel felt something in his chest loosen, a tension he hadn't realized he'd been carrying. Good, he said simply, giving her a gentle squeeze. Good. The next few weeks established a routine of sorts at the Zane ranch. Samuel rose before dawn to tend to Rusty and the 2 milk cows he'd purchased from a neighboring ranch. Beatrice, eager to be useful, learned to collect eggs from the half-dozen hens that came with the property. Even little Ellie contributed, helping to set the table for meals and feed the barn cat that had adopted them on their second day. True to her word, Brianna rode out to the ranch 3 times a week for lessons. She arrived promptly at 1 o'clock each time, her saddlebags filled with books, slates, and other school supplies. The large kitchen table became a classroom, with Samuel often lingering nearby, ostensibly doing ranch work, but actually listening to the lessons with interest. You know, Brianna said to him one afternoon, as the girls worked on their arithmetic, you could join us instead of pretending not to listen from the doorway. Samuel felt his face warm at being caught. Don't want to interrupt your teaching. Nonsense, she replied, pulling out a chair for him. Everyone benefits from education, regardless of age. Reluctantly, Samuel sat down. He'd never admit it, but he found himself looking forward to Brianna's visits as much as the girls did. There was something about her presence that brought life and warmth to the cabin that had been missing before. December arrived with a fresh blanket of snow and the promise of Christmas on the horizon. Samuel realized with a start that the girls would be expecting some celebration of the holiday. His own Christmases had been sparse affairs in recent years, often spent on the trail or in bunkhouses with other cowboys. Miss Vance, he asked after one of the lessons, while the girls were outside feeding the chickens. I was wondering if you might advise me on Christmas. Brianna looked up from gathering her books, an amused smile playing at her lips. Christmas is quite a broad topic, Mr. Zane. Could you be more specific? Samuel shuffled his feet, feeling awkward. The girls, I expect they'll want to celebrate properly, and I don't rightly know what that entails for children. Ah, Brianna nodded in understanding. Well, a tree would be a good start. Children love decorating them, and perhaps some simple gifts, nothing extravagant, but something to unwrap on Christmas morning. A tree, Samuel repeated, wondering how he'd get one inside the cabin. And gifts. What sort of gifts would be appropriate? Brianna studied him for a moment, her expression softening. You really care for them, don't you? They're good girls, Samuel said simply. They deserve some joy after all they've been through. Indeed they do, Brianna agreed. Tell you what, I'll help you. The school term ends next week, and I'll have more free time. We could make decorations with the girls, bake some cookies, make it a proper celebration. Relief washed over Samuel. I'd be much obliged, Miss Vance. Brianna, she said, surprising him. I think after all these weeks, you might call me Brianna. Samuel nodded, a warmth spreading through his chest that had nothing to do with the fire crackling in the hearth. Brianna it is. And I'm Samuel. The days leading up to Christmas were filled with more activity than the ranch had likely seen in years. Samuel chopped down a small pine tree from the nearby woods and secured it in a corner of the main room. Brianna taught the girls to string popcorn and cranberries into garlands, and they spent one afternoon cutting paper snowflakes to hang from the branches. Samuel rode into town alone one morning, leaving the girls with Brianna for an extra lesson. His real purpose was to purchase gifts, a task that proved more daunting than he'd anticipated. Having trouble deciding, Mrs. Blackwood asked, finding him staring helplessly at a display of dolls. I've never bought gifts for children before, Samuel admitted, especially girls. Mrs. Blackwood patted his arm sympathetically. Well, every little girl needs a doll of her own, and Beatrice might appreciate a book of her own as well. She certainly loves to read. With Mrs. Blackwood's guidance, Samuel selected a porcelain face doll with brown hair for Ellie and a beautifully illustrated book of fairy tales for Beatrice. As an afterthought, he also purchased a small silver locket for each girl. And what about Miss Vance? Mrs. Blackwood asked with a knowing smile. Surely you'll want something for her as well. Samuel hadn't considered getting Brianna a gift, but now the idea seemed obvious. What would be appropriate? After careful consideration, he selected a finely crafted leather-bound journal with cream-colored pages. Brianna often mentioned wanting to record her teaching experiences, and this seemed a practical yet personal choice. When he returned to the ranch, he found the cabin filled with the scent of gingerbread. Brianna and the girls had been baking, and the kitchen table was covered with cookies in various shapes. "Mr. Zane!" Ellie exclaimed, running to him with flour-dusted hands. "Look what we made!" Samuel caught her up in his arms, no longer surprised by how natural such gestures had become. "I see that. Smells mighty fine in here." Brianna turned from the stove, her cheeks flushed from the heat and a smudge of flour on her nose. "The girls wanted to surprise you. We're decorating them with sugar icing," Beatrice explained proudly. "Miss Vance says that's how they do it back east." "Is that so?" Samuel set Ellie down and moved to examine their handiwork. "Well, I'd say these are the finest gingerbread cookies west of the Mississippi." That evening, after the girls had gone to bed and the cookies were cooling on racks, Samuel and Brianna sat by the fire, each with a cup of coffee. "Thank you," Samuel said quietly, "for all of this. I wouldn't have known where to begin." Brianna shook her head. "You underestimate yourself, Samuel. Those girls adore you, and it's clear you feel the same about them." "They've changed everything," he admitted. 3 months ago, I was just a solitary cowboy with a piece of land. Now, he gestured around the cabin, which had transformed from a sparse bachelor's quarters to a home with children's drawings pinned to the walls and small boots by the door. "Now you're a family," Brianna finished for him, "or the beginnings of one. At least." Samuel looked at her then, really looked at her. The firelight caught the auburn highlights in her hair and softened her features. She'd become a constant in their lives these past weeks, her presence as natural as breathing. "What about you?" he asked suddenly. "Don't you have family waiting for you somewhere? Someone special?" Brianna's smile turned wistful. "My parents passed years ago. I came west for the teaching position adventure, I suppose. As for someone special," she shook her head. "Most men don't want a wife who's more educated than they are." "Seems to me that would be an advantage," Samuel said, "having someone smart to talk to at the end of the day." Their eyes met across the space between them, and something unspoken passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, of possibility. "It's getting late," Brianna said finally, setting down her empty cup. "I should head back to town before the snow starts again." Samuel walked her to the door, helping her with her coat. "Will you come for Christmas? The girls would love it, and so would I," he added, surprising himself with his boldness. Brianna's eyes widened slightly, but she nodded. "I'd like that very much." Christmas morning dawned clear and cold. Samuel had been up since before first light, stoking the fire and putting coffee on to boil. He'd wrapped the girls' presents in brown paper tied with red ribbon, another of Brianna's suggestions, and placed them under the tree. The patter of small feet announced the girls' awakening. They appeared in the doorway of the bedroom they shared, still in their nightgowns, eyes wide with excitement. "Merry Christmas," Samuel greeted them. "Looks like Santa found his way to our ranch." "Santa!" Ellie squealed, rushing to the tree. Beatrice followed more sedately, but her eyes shone with the same excitement. "Can we open them now?" Ellie asked, already fingering a package. "Let's wait for Miss Vance," Samuel suggested. "She should be here soon." As if on cue, there was a knock at the door. Samuel opened it to find Brianna standing there, her arms laden with parcels and her cheeks rosy from the cold. "Merry Christmas," she called as she entered, setting her bundles down near the tree. The morning passed in a blur of torn paper, exclamations of delight, and heartfelt thanks. Ellie clutched her new doll as if it were made of gold, while Beatrice immediately began paging through her book of fairy tales. Both girls were overjoyed with their lockets, which contained tiny photographs of their parents that Samuel had found among their meager possessions and had carefully trimmed to fit. "Your turn," Samuel said to Brianna, handing her the wrapped journal. Her eyes widened in surprise. "You didn't have to get me anything." "Wanted to," he said simply. Brianna carefully unwrapped the gift, her expression softening when she saw the journal. "Oh, Samuel, it's beautiful. Thank you." "Open yours now, Mr. Zane," Beatrice urged, pointing to the last package under the tree. Samuel hadn't expected a gift for himself. He unwrapped it to find a hand-knitted scarf in a deep blue wool. "We helped Miss Vance make it," Ellie explained proudly. I held the yarn, and Beatrice learned to knit a little bit. It's perfect, Samuel said, his voice rough with emotion as he wrapped it around his neck. Best gift I've ever received. After a Christmas dinner of roast chicken and all the trimmings, with Brianna and the girls doing most of the cooking, while Samuel watched in amazement, they sat around the fire singing carols. Ellie eventually fell asleep in Samuel's lap, and Beatrice's eyelids grew heavy despite her attempts to stay awake. I should put them to bed, Samuel whispered, standing carefully with Ellie in his arms. Beatrice followed drowsily, pausing to kiss Brianna's cheek before shuffling off to the bedroom. When Samuel returned, Brianna was standing by the window, watching the snow that had begun to fall. It's getting worse out there, he observed, coming to stand beside her. The pass to town might be difficult. Brianna nodded. I was just thinking the same thing. Perhaps I should start back now, before it gets too deep. Samuel placed a hand on her arm. Or you could stay. We have the small room off the kitchen. It's not much, but it would be safer than traveling in this weather. Brianna hesitated, then nodded. Perhaps that would be best. Later, as they sat by the dying fire, the cabin quiet except for the occasional crackle of embers and the soft hush of falling snow, Samuel found himself speaking from the heart. This is the first real Christmas I've had since before the war, he said quietly. Having the girls here, and you, it's made this place feel like a home. Brianna looked at him, her gaze steady and warm. They adore you, you know. You've given them security when they needed it most. I never thought I'd have a family, Samuel admitted. After the war, I just drifted, never stayed in one place long enough to put down roots. And now I can't imagine being anywhere else, or with anyone else. The words hung in the air between them, laden with meaning. Brianna's breath caught. Samuel, I know it's fast, he said quickly, and I'm not asking for anything. Just wanted you to know that you've become important to us, to me. She reached out then, laying her hand over his. You've become important to me, too. The winter passed in a rhythm of chores, lessons, and increasingly comfortable evenings by the fire. Brianna spent more and more time at the ranch, often staying overnight when the weather turned bad. The small room off the kitchen gradually accumulated her books, a shawl draped over the chair, little touches that marked her presence. By February, it was clear to anyone with eyes that Samuel Zane was deeply in love with Brianna Vance, though neither had spoken the words aloud. The girls thrived under their combined care, growing healthier and happier as the weeks passed. Ellie's nightmares about losing her parents gradually subsided, and Beatrice's shoulders lost the tense set of someone carrying too much responsibility too young. As the first signs of spring appeared, a bit of green poking through the melting snow, longer days filled with sunshine, Samuel knew a decision was approaching. He'd promised to take the girls to Helena to find their aunt when the mountain passes cleared. It was a promise he intended to keep, though the thought of the girls leaving tore at his heart. What if we find her and she wants to take us? Beatrice asked one evening as Samuel tucked her into bed. Will we have to go? Samuel smoothed her hair back from her forehead. She's your family, Beatrice. If she can provide a good home for you and Ellie, then yes, you should be with her. Beatrice's eyes filled with tears. But you're our family now, too. You and Miss Vance. Samuel felt his own eyes grow damp. No matter what happens, you will always have a home here. Always. The following week, as the roads finally became passable, Samuel prepared for the journey to Helena. Brianna arrived early that morning to see them off, her expression carefully composed, though her eyes betrayed her sadness. You'll write and let me know what happens? She asked, as Samuel loaded the wagon with supplies for the trip. Of course, he promised. We should be back within 2 weeks, one way or another. And if you find their aunt, if she wants them to stay? Samuel paused in his work. Then I'll come back alone. Brianna nodded, her gaze dropping to the ground. The cabin will seem very quiet without them. Brianna, Samuel said, taking her hands in his. No matter what happens in Helena, I need to ask you something when I return. Her eyes met his, a flicker of hope lighting them. Samuel, not now, he said gently. When I get back, some things deserve to be said properly, with no rush and no uncertainty. She nodded, understanding in her eyes. I'll be here. The journey to Helena took 4 days of steady travel. The girls, excited at first by the adventure, grew quiet as they neared the city. The reality of possibly finding their aunt and the changes that might bring weighing on them. Helena bustled with activity. A far cry from the quiet of the ranch, or even the modest settlement of Buffalo Creek. Samuel secured rooms at a respectable boarding house before beginning their search for Eleanor Pearson, the girl's maternal aunt. It took 2 days of inquiries before they located her, a widow who worked as a seamstress in a dress shop on the main street. Samuel left the girls at the boarding house for this initial meeting, wanting to assess the situation before introducing them. Eleanor Pearson proved to be a handsome woman in her 40s, with the same dark hair and expressive eyes as Beatrice. When Samuel explained who he was and why he had come, she sank into a chair, overcome with emotion. "I've been searching for them," she said, tears streaming down her face. "When I heard about my sister and her husband, I wrote to the last address I had, but the letters came back. I didn't know where to look." "They're safe," Samuel assured her. "They've been living with me on my ranch near Buffalo Creek since December." Eleanor clasped his hand gratefully. Thank you for caring for them when they had no one else." "They're remarkable children," Samuel said simply. "It was no hardship." "Will you bring them to me?" she asked eagerly. "Today, if possible?" Samuel nodded, feeling a heaviness settle in his chest. Of course. The reunion that afternoon was filled with tears and embraces. Eleanor clasped both girls to her, murmuring words of love and relief. The girls, though initially shy, quickly warmed to their aunt, especially when they discovered she had known their mother all her life and had stories to share about their mother's childhood. Samuel stood apart, watching the scene with a complex mixture of emotions. Joy for the girls, who had found family when they thought all was lost, and a profound sadness at the thought of returning to his ranch without them. Eleanor invited them all to dinner at her modest but comfortable home. As the evening progressed, she pulled Samuel aside while the girls explored their aunt's sewing room. "Mr. Zane," she began, "I cannot thank you enough for what you've done for my nieces." "Anyone would have done the same," Samuel demurred. "I don't believe that's true," Eleanor said firmly. "You opened your home and your heart to 2 strangers. That speaks to your character." She paused, seeming to gather her thoughts. "I want to raise them, of course. They're all I have left of my sister." Samuel nodded, his throat tight. "They'll have a good life with you. But," Eleanor continued, surprising him, "I also see how attached they are to you. The way Ellie looks to you for reassurance, how Beatrice's eyes light up when she speaks of your ranch and the lessons with Miss Vance." She smiled gently. "They've formed a bond with both of you, it seems. I wouldn't want to sever that completely." Hope stirred in Samuel's chest. "What are you suggesting?" "Perhaps a compromise? They could come live with me here in Helena, get a proper education in the city school, but they could spend summers at your ranch, if you're amenable." "I'd like that very much," Samuel said, relief washing over him. "And I know Miss Vance would as well." Eleanor's eyes twinkled with understanding. "Ah, this schoolteacher. She's more than just their teacher, isn't she? At least in your eyes." Samuel felt his cheeks warm. "She's important to me." "Love finds us in unexpected ways," Eleanor said softly. "My sister always said that. She'd be pleased that her daughters found care and affection when they needed it most." That night, as Samuel prepared to return to his room at the boarding house, Beatrice and Ellie clung to him at the door. "Will we ever see you again?" Ellie asked tearfully. Samuel knelt down, gathering both girls into his arms. "Of course you will. Your aunt and I have already discussed it. You'll come stay at the ranch every summer, and I'll visit you here when I can." "Promise?" Beatrice demanded, her eyes serious. "I promise," Samuel said firmly. "Some bonds can't be broken by distance. What we've built together, that's forever." The journey back to the ranch was solitary and reflective. Samuel found himself thinking of the future summers filled with the girls' laughter, winters that would seem too quiet without them. But most of all, he thought of Brianna and the question that had been forming in his heart for months now. When he finally crested the hill that overlooked his property, the sight of smoke rising from the chimney made his heart leap. It was too early for Brianna's regular teaching day, but somehow He knew she would be there. She was waiting on the porch when he rode up, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. As he dismounted, she searched his face, then glanced at the empty wagon behind him. "They found their aunt," she said, understanding immediately. "They stayed with her?" Samuel nodded, climbing the steps to stand before her. "She's a good woman. They'll have a proper life in Helena, with all the advantages of the city." "I'm glad," Brianna said, though her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "They deserve that, but I'll miss them terribly." "They'll be back," Samuel said, taking her hands in his. "Eleanor, that's their aunt. She suggested they spend summers here. She understands what we've come to mean to each other." Hope bloomed in Brianna's expression. "Truly? Truly?" Samuel took a deep breath, gathering his courage. "Brianna, there's something I've been meaning to ask you, something I've felt for months now, but wasn't sure I had the right to say." "Samuel, I love you," he said simply. "I think I have since that first day in the general store, when you offered to teach 2 orphan girls you'd never met because education mattered to you. I love your kindness, your intelligence, your gentle way with the girls. I love how you've made this place feel like a home." Tears spilled down Brianna's cheeks. "I love you too. I think I knew it that first Christmas, watching you with the girls. You've become everything to me." Samuel reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "I stopped in Helena before I left. Wanted to do this properly." He opened the box to reveal a simple gold band set with a small diamond. "Brianna Vance, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Of helping me raise 2 wonderful girls every summer and building a life together the rest of the year?" "Yes," Brianna breathed, her eyes shining. "Yes, with all my heart." Samuel slipped the ring onto her finger, then drew her into his arms, his heart fuller than he'd ever imagined possible. From the darkest winter night, when he'd found 2 shivering girls alone in his cabin, had come the greatest blessing of his life. A family created not by blood, but by love and choice. They were married that May in the small church in Buffalo Creek, with Beatrice and Ellie traveling from Helena with their aunt to serve as flower girls. The entire town turned out for the celebration, delighted by the romance that had blossomed in their midst. "You look beautiful," Samuel whispered as they shared their first dance as husband and wife. Brianna smiled up at him, radiant in her ivory gown. "And you look happier than I've ever seen you." "I am," he acknowledged. "I never thought I'd find this kind of happiness. A wife, a family, a home that's truly a home." "Neither did I," Brianna admitted. "Teaching was to be my life. I never expected to find a man who valued my mind as much as my heart." "Both are treasures," Samuel said, pulling her closer. "And I intend to spend the rest of my life showing you just how much I cherish them, cherish you." That night, as the celebration wound down and the stars appeared in the velvet sky above, Beatrice found Samuel sitting on the porch of the small house he and Brianna would share in town during the school year, with the ranch serving as their summer home. "Mr. Zane," she said, sitting beside him. "Can I still call you that, or should it be something else now?" Samuel smiled at her. "You can call me whatever feels right to you." "Beatrice," she nodded thoughtfully. "I'm glad you found Miss Vance, or that she found you. I think you needed each other." "We did," Samuel agreed. "Just like I needed you and Ellie, and you needed me." "Do you remember what you said when you found us?" Beatrice asked. "That first night at the ranch?" Samuel cast his mind back. "I said you were mine to protect." "And you have," Beatrice said softly. "But you've done more than that. You've given us a family again, different from before, but still a family." Samuel felt his throat tighten with emotion. "That's what we are," he agreed. "A family, always." As the years passed, the Zane family grew and flourished. Brianna continued teaching at the Buffalo Creek School, earning a reputation as one of the finest educators in the territory. Samuel expanded his ranch, raising cattle and horses that became known for their quality throughout Montana. True to their arrangement, Beatrice and Ellie spent every summer at the ranch, their arrival each June a cause for celebration. They grew into capable, educated young women, Beatrice eventually following in her father's and Brianna's footsteps to become a teacher herself, while Ellie discovered a talent for art and illustration. 2 years after their wedding, Samuel and Brianna welcomed a son they named James, followed by a daughter, Sarah, 18 months later. The cabin that had once housed a lonely cowboy expanded to accommodate their growing family, with additions built on as needed. On the 10th anniversary of the night, Samuel had found 2 shivering girls in his cabin. The entire family gathered at the ranch for a special dinner. Eleanor had come from Helena with Beatrice, now 20, and Ellie, 17. James and Sarah, 8 and 6 respectively, idolized their older sisters and followed them everywhere. As they sat around the table laden with food, Samuel looked at the faces gathered there. Brianna, her beauty enhanced by the passing years and the joy she found in their life together. Beatrice and Ellie, no longer frightened orphans, but confident young women. His own children, growing strong in the security of their parents' love. And Eleanor, who had become a dear friend and extended family member. "I'd like to propose a toast," he said, raising his glass. "To family, the one we find, the one we choose, the one we build together. 10 years ago, a storm brought 2 special girls to my door, and in protecting them, I found the greatest treasures of my life." His eyes met Brianna's across the table, and the love that passed between them was palpable. "To family," he repeated softly. "To family," they echoed, glasses raised in celebration of the bonds that had formed on that cold winter night when a lonely cowboy had opened his door and his heart to 2 orphan girls and promised to protect them. A promise that had grown into a lifetime of love.